my first podcast episodes this summer was why Dak Prescott was so undervalued, and it didn't make sense that for the first time in several years, he had a strong number two wide receiver ever since Amari Cooper left. That's a big deal because 2023 it was CeeDee Lamb or bust. CeeDee Lamb had over 400 fantasy points. The next best wide receiver in terms of targets, I think receptions, was Brandon Cooks towards the end of his career, and then Michael Gallup toward what would become the end of his career. It was essentially a one-man wide receiver core where CeeDee Lamb led the league in targets and catches. The thought going into 2025 was, oh, great, now they finally have a great number two in Pickens. Pickens is now averaging more fantasy points than Lamb. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but he went into last night's game maybe 1 or 2 points more per game advantage over CeeDee Lamb. It's probably now 3, maybe 3.5. That doesn't tell the whole story. Pickens this is a career year for him, and he's playing with arguably the best quarterback of his career. And CeeDee Lamb, outside of that 2023 campaign, has never topped 18 points per game in any other season, which is odd when you think about it, because CeeDee Lamb had that one incredible season. I drafted him that year. I think I drafted him maybe 8th, 9th, 10th overall, whatever he was, whatever his ADP was. I drafted him around there, and he, helped lead me to almost glory. I didn't quite win the title that year, but he was great. But it's amazing to think that 1 year, when I think about CeeDee Lamb, and maybe some of you think the same way, you think, oh, he's elite. Well, he was elite one season. And the rest of the time, he's been outstanding. I would say maybe near elite or one step down from near elite in terms of fantasy points per game. Injuries play a role in that. And, you could argue that this year, being hurt and maybe he wasn't 100%, in one game, who knows? That maybe you could argue his 16, 17 points that he's averaging per game could have been higher. But the point is, a case could be made that Pickens is the number one in that receiver core, and CeeDee Lamb is the number two. It sounds like blasphemy, right? I mean, who would say that? But we also have to acknowledge the fact that, again, Pickens is playing with the best quarterback of his career, and CeeDee Lamb had one amazing season, truly historic season, and it was because there was no one else except a fading Brandon Cooks and a fading Michael Gallup to throw to among the wide receivers. Going forward, I think managers need to come to grips with the possibility that Pickens could outscore CeeDee Lamb the rest of the season, just as he's done for a little more than the first half of the season on a per game basis. I'm not discounting the fact that, CeeDee Lamb missed time with an injury. I'm talking about per game. Pickens could realistically outscore CeeDee Lamb. That changes a lot. Because if you drafted CeeDee Lamb, you probably drafted him in the first round, and you're expecting first round value. And the Cowboys don't have a favorable fantasy playoff schedule. And so it's compounding that challenge of, I'm all in on Dak Prescott. I was all in on CeeDee Lamb. I was mostly in on George Pickens. And in fact, at the end of the day, Pickens might end up being the biggest bargain of the three, with Dak Prescott being a close second and CeeDee Lamb potentially being a bust. It is odd. I think Javonte Williams and that strong backfield, something that the Cowboys really haven't had since Zeke Elliott's heyday, is a dominant backfield, not just a good one like when Tony Pollard was starting for them after Zeke Elliott left, but really more of a dominant backfield that matters. Ferguson at tight end matters, but there's not a lot else going on. And so as long as the Cowboys don't have to sling it deep into the fourth quarter, it seems that we're at that point where CeeDee Lamb needs to do most of his damage in the first three quarters. And if he's getting out-targeted by George Pickens on average, or if it's very close, that's something that Lamb has not encountered since maybe his rookie campaign, when he averaged about 13 fantasy points per game. Obviously, Lamb is a far greater fantasy talent and on the field talent than he was in his rookie campaign at age 21. But managers need to be cognizant of that. And one of my opponents has, and I've mentioned before, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and George Pickens. He's all in. It's boom bust with the Cowboys, and I respect that. Cowboys, if you're going to go boom bust on a trio, that's a pretty good trio to have. But if you just have CeeDee Lamb, you should take a look and figure out, okay, what's the realistic expectation? Not that you can do much about it, but if the trade deadline hasn't passed yet, and you can still get, especially after last night's game, CeeDee Lamb got 17, 18 fantasy points, whatever it was, you could still trade him away for elite or near elite value. But looking at his per game statistics year after year, if we discount 2023, he's merely great. And I think if you can get elite or near elite value for someone who otherwise has been great, I think you're coming out ahead. I'm BJ Riddell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog. Email me anytime. We'll see you tomorrow.